Hello, Clement29 here, and I'm finally glad I can say I'm back with another review for the Rush Hour TV show. This time, it's episode 9. So after we've been forced to endure a 2-month hiatus, how is this episode? Was it worth the wait? Let's take a look. The plot of this episode is, well, it starts off simply enough. It's about a guy who's in prison, and he breaks out. And Lee and Carter have to help the FBI track him down. That's basically it. I don't want to spoil it by going into details, but that's basically the plot. Now, the structure of this episode is very much follow the breadcrumbs and figure out what's going on. You know, figuring out that things are really how they appear from when they first looked at it. I did rather enjoy it. I actually ended up enjoying this episode a lot more than I thought I would. I was actually really intrigued with the story of what they were doing with this one guy who broke out of prison, why he broke out of prison, the background for why he got into prison, all the stuff involving his family, his former employer, yada yada, all that stuff. I actually really like that. Overall, though, the plot is pretty simple, and it does tend to... It's actually more plot focused, even though I can't really say it. Which is why I can't really say a whole lot without spoiling it. But needless to say, I did enjoy the plot. It gave a lot of good opportunities to see Carter and Lee interact and go back and forth with, their regular banter. Now, for the humor, there are a few running gags in this episode. One of them is we get the return of the captain's thirst for Lee as she... Okay, so there's this one... Another thing that I'll talk about in a minute with the running gag of Carter being rude. The captain, goes up and pats Lee on the chest like, okay, good job. And then she's just like, tap, 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 tap. She's just like, my God, your muscles. Just like, good gosh, woman. I mean, it wasn't enough that she had called Lee handsome in an earlier episode. Now she does that later in the episode. She comes in, she starts patting his abs, and I'm just like, good gosh, woman, calm your thirst. The other running gag, which forms the most memorable joke in the whole episode, is Carter being rude, especially to Dee Dee, and her refusing to talk to him. But then Lee comes up, and he is incredibly very polite, overly eloquently polite, and then Dee Dee's just like, oh, well, of course, Detective Lee, I can give you all that information. And this actually does it with, the captain does this too, though she points out how over the top Lee is being in his politeness. It's actually really funny. I actually did like, though, with Carter, actually, he's kind of being a dick, and it made me think a bit of movie Carter. Because, those moments in the movies where Carter says something just totally insensitive and he doesn't, and, without even, recognizing that what he said he was being kind of douchey. Yeah, Carter was like that in this episode, and I kind of like that. He was, every time when they would go and call Dee Dee for something, he'd be like, what you got? Or something like that, and she'd be like, and then he'd have to eloquently apologize when they're at the precinct, and Dee Dee's like, I got something, and Carter's just like, give it to me, and Lee's like, Dee Dee, I would be most humbled if you could provide us with the information that you have gathered. And then Dee Dee would be like, oh, you see, you're being polite. And then she wouldn't even respond to Carter. It was actually really funny. It kind of reminded me of the way Carter got treated in the beginning of Rush Hour 1 when he's at the precinct at the LAPD and everyone is just annoyed to all hell with him. Other than that, there isn't a whole lot of humor. Oh, there's Carter's really, really bad Denzel Washington impression and Lee being like, okay, good job. I did like, though, at the end when Carter made Lee watch Training Day, and then Lee was just like, this is the worst movie I've ever seen. And then Carter and Gerald were like, oh, how dare you talk about Denzel that way. Oh, it was really funny. I mean, this wasn't like a whole bundle of laughs, but there were some good laughs in it. Now, the action, this episode was surprisingly kind of light on action. There was a little bit of fighting. There was more action, like more at the tail end of the episode than anything. But they used next to no slow motion. They used next to no slow motion in this episode. There are only 2 times in the entire episode that there was slow motion used that I noticed. One was a scuffle with Lee and the criminal, and I'm not entirely sure, it looked like when I think Lee grabbed him and threw him into a wall, or he grabbed Lee and threw him into a wall. It looked like it kind of did a little slow motion, but if it wasn't, it wasn't big. And the other one is when Carter shoots the main bad guy of the episode, and it goes boosh. But other than that, no. I am so ecstatic. Like, oh my gosh. This is what I've been saying from the very beginning. Calm down. It's like the action, good action speaks for itself. You don't need to overdo slow motion. You don't need to Zack Snyder it up. But, oh my gosh, finally. I mean, the action isn't like ultra impressive. The only real good action is at the end. Really, like I said, most of the action happens at the tail end, with a little bit in the middle. But mostly it's Lee and Carter on their investigation, like I said before. And it's a little bit more straight fights, but the end does have Lee using some goofy stuff. Like they're in a flower shop, so he goes to a shelf and he hits these flowers. He hits them into a guy, and then to distract him, and that's some good stuff at the end. It's not the best, but it's still cool. Now for the characters, we get. I did like that they were playing up Carter's kind of, obnoxiousness. And it does feel a little bit closer to Carter in the movies. Another thing I liked is that Carter swore a lot more in this episode. Now, of course, given that, this is a TV show, they can't exactly get away with the level of swearing that the movies do. Because Carter swears quite a bit in the movies. But he does say a little, but he does actually swear as much as he can really, get away with. So I'm glad that he's doing that. Excuse me, because that felt more like Carter when he's swearing, and it's actually kind of funny. Dee Dee actually has some moments in this. She talks about her son again, which is great, because surprisingly we haven't got a whole lot about her son. Which, I mean, granted, he's a sub-minor character. I think he's only appeared once in the episode. I think that was episode 5. Yeah, because it was when Kim broke into her house to get to Lee, and then we saw her kid. Yeah, she mentions him, specifically when comparing Carter's mannerisms to him. She's like, do you know who has better manners between you and my 5-year-old son? And Carter's just like, well, given that I'm a grown adult, I would, I want to say me. And she's like, yeah, you'd want to. Oh gosh, the biting sarcasm from Dee Dee in this episode. Oh my gosh, all the sarcasm directed at Carter. It's great, especially when you can see he's sort of trying to hit on her, and she's just like, no sell. Mainly because she's focused on Lee. She was really like, oh, thank you, Lee, you're so great and polite, whenever he, would be overly polite to compensate for Carter's over obnoxiousness. And at the end, after, he's sitting there, after he finishes watching Training Day, Lee's sitting on the couch with Gerald and Carter, and Carter and Gerald are throwing a fit because he didn't like it. And then Dee Dee's just like, hey, Lee, why don't you come over here and have a drink with me? And she has a glass of wine, and I'm just like, goodness gracious, you you don't even need to try to see if there's some sort of like USD going on with them, especially from Dee Dee. And I think I kind of found the source of that. I watched this interview with John Fu, Justin Hires, and Amy Garcia, who are the actors for Lee, Carter, and Dee Dee. And Amy Garcia said that her nickname for John Fu was Panty Dropper. Oh, okay, so I think I see where Dee Dee having a thing for Lee comes in. So yeah, we get a little bit more of that. Yeah, they're definitely shippable. And actually, this is one thing I thought about. I thought it was funny, having rewatched the Rush Hour movies, I did notice it actually would make sense if Lee got with Dee Dee, because she's Hispanic. And then so is Isabella, who is Lee's love interest in the movies. So I thought it was like, that's kind of brilliant in hindsight. The only other thing in this episode is actually a little important thing. It's definitely like this little subtle plot build-up. Lee is talking to Carter, and he's talking about, Kim, and he basically talked about how when their parents died, he had to raise Kim almost like a daughter. He was her older brother too, and he says, I'm only 2 years older than her, but I had to be like a father to her. And you can definitely see, going back to the pilot episode, and given that that and episode 5 is the most we've seen from of Kim, and you actually do see that way Lee and Kim are, he definitely does have that caretaker, vibe with him. And she does say that, you don't need to take care of me and all that stuff. But he does mention that his father was a police officer, which, like, Lee's father was in the movies. But he says that, he's like, he was a police officer, and as such is a skilled driver. So I don't understand how he could have easily lost control of the car. And like, okay, this is dropping hints that there's something going on with how Lee's parents died. Which, granted, I could have called that from before, but this is something that's officially acknowledging that. This could have just been a tragic accident that was horrible, but this is implying that there was something going on. And I'm wondering if they're going to bring in sort of a Ricky Tan type character who is his father's partner and ended up killing him. I'm actually really interested to see that, because I'd really like to see the show take in a Ricky Tan character. I don't know if they're going to do that, but if they do, it will probably come in like at the end of the season or in the or I wanted to say next season, but probably never going to get one since they already canceled it. But, I would imagine that if they were going to do that, that would happen later, since we already have the Dragon Heads going on and the Triads in Los Angeles. But I would also be interested to see them tackling a Rush Hour 2, type story and bringing in elements from that. Other than that, though, I think that's pretty much it to talk about the episode. The episode was good. It's not my favorite episode, but I would actually say it's one of the better episodes in the series so far. It's certainly not bad. It's not like episode, was it 6 or 7? I think it was 6. The one where Lee and Carter infiltrated the school. That one was just, But this is a good episode, and I definitely like this. And I'm really looking forward to episode 10. And kind of sad that we only have a handful of episodes left for the show. But I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to review every episode as they come out. So thank you for watching, and honestly, I should have the next review up in a couple days, actually, considering how late it took me to get to this. But yes, thank you for watching, and tune in next time for the review for episode 10 of Rush Hour.